Luke, it's the main event. It's the rematch. Pena versus Nunes Deuce. But in hindsight, looking back to their UFC 269 fight, maybe the biggest upset in MMA history, what do you believe was separating what Julianna Pena did successfully to win that fight? What do you think was the single biggest reason for Amanda Nunes' implosion that night that made that such a shocking upset?
Single biggest, right? But you would agree. I will answer the question in good faith. I will do that. However, just before I do, you would agree that it's got to be a combination of factors. I just want to put that on the table.
Absolutely.
Yes?
Not only a combination of factors within Amanda and what went wrong, a large combination of what went right for Julianna Pena. And I know a lot of people ripped me for my takes during pregame preview, which were very macro. I do have some micro takes as well, Luke, from rewatching Fight 1. But when you do look back on Fight 1, what's the biggest thing Nunes got wrong? Mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, anything that caused that defeat?
I think in the way in which Julianna Pena decided to fight her, I think... So when we use the word expose, it's overused, right? It means like, oh, they were this fraud all along. I don't mean it in that way whatsoever. We're talking about a first ballot Hall of Famer, Mount Rushmore of women's MMA, however you want to put it. I don't mean it that way. But in terms of showcasing that for all the good things Amanda Nunes is good at and all the things that she's accomplished, she got outboxed. There's a video that came out yesterday. I've been talking about it because I thought it was just pretty sharp. Jack Slack's a great internet sort of personality, but he does really great technique breakdowns and fight breakdowns. He's a very salty dog on Twitter on purpose because he likes to be a bit of a jokester in that way. I like him a lot. And he had a video talking about how basically there was a certain style of jab that Amanda Nunes was using called the dipping jab, where they get off as they throw and they dip to the side. It's not the same as a slip, which is almost like a shoulder roll. It's a little bit different. Slipping and dipping are two different things. But it was a dip jab, and basically Amanda Nunes had no answer for it. So to answer the question, she got outboxed because in the way in which she had been winning up to that point, she never developed any kind of answer for that. She just didn't have the technical skill on that night to deal with that particular style of attack. To me, that's the biggest factor. I recognize BC. There might be other ones. Curious to hear what your thought on this is. But dude, I say it all the time. Skills win fights. And Amanda Nunes might have overall more skills and overall a much better resume. But on that night, in the way in which they chose to fight, she came up the less skillful.
Oh, absolutely. It's interesting. My answer is a little bit more, it's connected to yours, but it's a little bit more chicken and egg. Yours is the result that she essentially got outboxed in that second round that led to her, you can say implosion, you could say just she got broken down, and taken the back of, and I'm not even sure that choke was actually in. It was so damn startling. I mean, look, I was lucky enough to be cage side. I was cage side, by the way, when Amanda won the title from Misha, but I was lucky enough to be cage side when Amanda knocked out Cyborg in that wild 51-second fight, and then this fight. And both had just such surreal elements to what I was watching. But I think it was the chicken that set up the egg in this case, and that was the exposure of Amanda's gas tank. And here's what's really interesting, Luke, is it's kind of always been, originally had been the major Achilles heel of Amanda's game. You look back to the way that she folded against Kat Zingano after dominating early. And you can even look back to UFC 196, the first fight with Valentina, how much that fight shifted in round 3. Some people even go further, and I've read some very educated comments on some of our videos where our viewers are like, also, don't forget, she gassed out as well against Germaine Durandamy once the fight went to the ground, but had such a ground advantage over Durandamy in the same way she did not have over Julianna in this fight, that it didn't end up becoming a factor. Luke, that first round in which Amanda won against Julianna, I don't know how you could score it for Pena, but Pena did so many sneaky things upon rewatch that sort of perfectly set up a foundation for what was such a monumental upset. And look, that upset doesn't happen unless Julianna's willing to stand in and take hella punishment. And she did when Amanda got into fight or flight in round 2 and they had some crazy exchanges. But in that first round, Luke, not only was it the active guard and the constant feinting that essentially froze Amanda and took away her jab, which is a big part of how she sets up that right hand. But once that fight went to the ground, even though Amanda ultimately had the dominant position and near chokes, dude, if you really watch closely, and this is something I did notice in real time, Julianna was grabbing on Amanda's arm, in theory, to try to go for eventually an armbar, Luke, but the constant yanking and battling for control not only put Amanda in an uncomfortable position in which she wasn't even putting in offensive output, she was really just trying to fight it off, look for a choke, not really, let's just get out of this round. Dude, that gassed Amanda. The yanking on the arm, the constant upper body, grappling and in sort of effect, it gassed her a lot. So then when that left hand started to ring up in round 2, it really put Amanda in the same position that she ironically put Cyborg in the first round of their fight, right? Lured the brawler at heart into a brawl. In this case, I think for Amanda, it may have just been a little bit of frustration and desperation and thinking, oh crap, I got the gas tank yanked upon. So I think it was actually more of that set up the foundation for her to be willing to stand and trade. And to your credit, it wasn't just the jab, it was the left hand in general. It was some of these little looping sort of check hooks. It was just an educated left hand that once Amanda was tired, it really exposed her boxing. And I got some flack, Luke, because during our pregame preview, I mentioned, look, Amanda's got some of the best boxing in this game, particularly on the female side. I don't necessarily mean in the most traditional sense. I just mean in the sense of success and effects. You stand and box with Amanda Nunes, history tells you get knocked the hell out, Luke, okay? And anyone who wants to say that she has no idea about distance or IQ, rewatch the second Shevchenko fight. It was a chess match and she won it, whether you believe she won it or not. But I think once she got exhausted, that just opened the fight up to chaos. So, Luke, do you believe in sort of this theory that Amanda learned in the first Shevchenko fight, and I'm borrowing this from some of our viewers, I thought it was very educated, that she learned in the third round of the first Shevchenko fight that if I try to wrestle aggressively for more than a round, like she did rounds 1 and 2, I'm going to gas myself out. It kind of resurfaced against GDR. Some people are thinking that's why she didn't try to wrestle Shevchenko at all in the rematch. Are you at least in belief of this as well, that going to the ground was the worst thing that could have happened to Nunes because she just got out-tricked into dumping half her gas tank?
Yes. Yeah, I think it's a huge component. Again, like all these things kind of work together. And then, by the way, there was like, who knows about the camp? The fact that she left American Top Team afterwards, again, I don't think it was just that camp. That was probably long simmering issues that came to a head as a consequence of the result and probably a few other factors.
Well, Luke, don't overlook that she said publicly she feels like the gym chose Kayla over her, which meant she wasn't getting the focus with, all of the coaches and the spotlight that she felt she deserved for being the GOAT, which is not unfair in theory. It's not unfair.
Right. I mean, there's probably something to that. And also there may have been a knee injury and everything else. All of those factors combined. But yes, like I go back to the Duran-Demi fight, which Amanda Nunes was able to get. But once she was able to get to these control or, I'm not going to call them stall positions, but I'll call them stop positions where you kind of get to the spot and then it kind of slows down there before a lot of other stuff happens. She was able to get her breath and there was enough of a wrestling advantage that Nunes retained where she wasn't forced to work that hard. With Pena, for all her strengths and weaknesses, she doesn't really just sort of relent to these positions. She kind of keeps working at them slowly but surely, right? There's a little bit more action there. Yeah, she got drained. There's no denying she got drained. And then on the feet, when she encountered other problems, who knows what her prep was like and everything else, it all just culminated in this disastrous performance where she gets finished inside of the second round. No doubt about it. I think if you're Julianna Pena, you already like an aggressive pace. Right? You saw an aggressive pace on the ground. She likes to go for aggressive takedowns, typically from body locks, although not exclusively from them. She likes to get right to business, right to action. She doesn't wait around. That is something of a, we'll see what happens on Saturday, but that kind of fighter, the one that likes to get to work, the one that has a high work rate, while having a fair amount of other issues in there, that is a bad matchup, I think, for Amanda Nunes. The second Shevchenko fight, when you watch it, what's the big takeaway that besides the fact that it was on the feet and it was very close? The pace was slow. The pace was very slow. That seems to me quite intentional. And there's other fights where she had against, who was the math teacher at 145?
Felicia Spencer.
Yeah. That fight wasn't as slow, but it was still slow enough. And it was Amanda Nunes dealing versus being on the defense and having to worry and trying to catch her breath and eating shots so she could keep up a slightly higher pace as a consequence. But I think if you're draining her, again, I go back to it, round 1, Conor versus Habib. You can say whatever you want about that round, but all that was designed to do was to take a guy who operates here and make him operate here, where he is much, much more beatable. And it worked perfectly as a consequence.
But here's what's crazy, is to get to the ground in that first round of their first fight, Pena went down twice. The first on kind of a slip when she got punched, but Amanda didn't take the bait and she got back up. The second was a fairly stiff jab. It looked like a right cross in real time. TC called it a jab on the broadcast. I never slowed it down to get but the point is, she got stung with a legit shot. She dropped, but this time Amanda took the bait and went in for the ground and pound. Can Julianna, and this might be better reserved for our Friday, actually, X's and O preview, but if we're establishing here that we feel like Julianna's got an advantage on the ground, not just in her submission potential, but, she tired out Amanda, who's just not fully comfortable there, can she get this fight to the ground? I know that the last takedown in round 2 was more Amanda was exhausted. She did a trip takedown from the clinch. Can she offensively shoot, Luke, to bring this fight to the ground in this rematch? And should that be a part of her strategy?
For Amanda or for Julianna?
For Pena to take advantage of exactly what we're talking about here.
So again, I want to leave a little bit of this, if I can, to Saturday. I'll just put it this way. Julianna Pena's takedown accuracy is fine. It's 55%. It's kind of noteworthy as her takedown defense is only 22%. I wonder if Amanda Nunes, I know she doesn't want to grapple, but I wonder if there might be some kind of case for her to take the bull by the horns, get Pena down, and then ground and pound, kind of set the tone there early. Probably not because of all the trade-offs that it comes with, but it is something worth thinking about. But yes, to answer the question, I don't think it's merely can she. I think eventually, yes, she certainly could. I think it's a must.